Welcome back, my awesome people. I am honored here to be sitting with Dr. Terry Smith of Emerald. Now, last time I did interview Dr. Trivedi, and he gave us amazing gems when it comes to the life sciences. But now we're going to take the flip side and we're going to start looking at biotechnology and the pharma sector and drug development. Because, for the past few years, drug development, medicines has been a hot topic. So before I say any more, Dr. Terry Smith will give us all the information and all the wisdom. Dr. Terry Smith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Definitely. And thank you for being here with me today. I know it's a very, very busy time with the market and the quarters. Just to get right into it, can you give us some background information on who you are, your journey into investment research and into Emerald, and what inspired you to get into biotech and drug development?
Sure. My path into investment research was not a typical one. I was a biology major in undergrad. I kind of realized towards the end, if I could have done this again, I would have been a business major. I was fortunate to find a PhD MBA program at Penn State. I did that. Towards the end of my PhD MBA program, I interned at Emerald. This was back in 2006, and I've been here ever since. I didn't even know equity research existed when I was in undergrad or even the early days of graduate school. It's kind of like an under the radar type of occupation.
It is. And you know what? Right now, it is the best position to be in because everybody is looking at the pharma sector, looking at biotech, especially with AI's influence and impact, pretty much taking over our future. So can you tell us a little bit more about Emerald's history, maybe its core mission?
Yeah, sure. Emerald, we're a long only small and mid cap growth manager. Long only means we don't short stocks. And we have been around since, I think, 1992. We're located in central Pennsylvania. Our office is in Lancaster. We manage about $4 billion in assets, and we're a diversified fund. So we manage money across all kinds of sectors. And I happen to be in the biotech sector. So that's the area of specialty that I work on. And that's what I know most about.
Nice. And so when your team approaches an investment opportunity or analysis, what is, I saw on the website that there's a 10-step process. Can you maybe elaborate on that?
Sure. There's a 10-step research process that we've standardized at Emerald. We use it across all sectors. As it pertains to me, the key things that I do are we review all the SEC filings. We make sure we understand all the background on the drug, review the medical literature. We talk to competitors. We talk to distributors. We talk to suppliers. We talk to the management team. We talk to competitive management teams. We talk to key opinion leader physicians. We want to understand as much as we possibly can about a company before we invest. We then build a model. We communicate a lot internally, and that's kind of the process that we implement across all the sectors that we invest in.
And I think that's very crucial, especially with the pharma sector, because you have to make sure that you do your due diligence and you look at what is going on and the timeline, because a lot of these companies can take 5 years to develop a drug, 10 years, maybe even 50 years. And just to stay on the pharma topic, so pharma makes billions in annual sales, and many of these companies are small and mid, other than, the large cap. What do you think these companies need to do to, I say, stay afloat? Some experts say funding, some say more breakthrough developments, and others are more into mergers and acquisitions. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the way I look at the world, Jacob, is there are about 700 publicly traded biotech companies, and the vast majority of these don't have any revenue. That's the area I live in. So I'm trying to value companies that don't have any revenue. And we can talk about how I do that a little bit more in the next couple minutes if you want. But so I'm focused on those guys. They usually have one or two, maybe three research projects that are in clinical trials. So they're testing these drugs in humans, looking to see if they work. And then the goal for most of them is pharma, large companies that you've heard of every day on the news. They tend to acquire these guys to refill their pipeline. So they buy the best projects that are successful. So pharma prefers to buy usually de-risked things. So I'm looking to find what companies are closest to becoming de-risked and will be valuable to pharma. Some companies can launch the drugs on their own, which we've been seeing more of lately, which is actually a tailwind for my space. So it's fine when that happens, as long as they can launch it efficiently with a small-ish sales force and have an eye towards profitability in 2 or 3 years.
Can you elaborate on de-risk? Does that mean, I guess, mitigating risk or?
So de-risk means, so when you think about my companies, like the clinical trial process, there's phase one, phase two, phase three. In phase one, you're kind of just you're putting the drug in healthy people that volunteer, they get paid for this, just to see, okay, does the drug get into the body as we think it should? Does it get distributed as we think it should? Are the blood levels what we think it should? And how often will we need to dose the drug? So that's phase one. Phase two is generally you're kind of like looking for signs of efficacy. So you're giving it to patients and you're looking to see, okay, if we give this drug, can we see their disease getting a little bit better? It doesn't have to be statistically significant or even against a placebo. They just want a sign before they invest in a big phase three study that's usually against a placebo. So that's phase three. So that's the process. De-risked is a phase three drug is more de-risked than a phase two. And generally my companies move up and their stock price moves up in a stepwise fashion when you get good de-risking data.
And I guess that kind of also proves that it's tried, tested, and true. There has been some background on it. It's not just 100% a blind approval. It's more of there has been some work behind it. And now talking about approval. So the FDA, of course, they approve and disapprove drugs all the time. How does this affect the way that you work with biotech or pharma or drug companies? The FDA can change regulations based on who's in charge. So what direction do you think the FDA is moving forward with?
Right. So FDA approves about 50 new drugs per year, and it's been pretty stable for the last, I don't know, 8 or 10 years. And more than half of these drugs are approved by they're owned by my companies. So my companies, I kind of think, are the innovation engine of all of global pharma. So FDA has been approving drugs at a steady cadence. And what we've been seeing is that FDA is actually willing to take a bit more risk. So the areas that I focus on are very serious diseases. Often they're genetic diseases. So you know you have this disease often at birth because you were diagnosed, but there's many times no treatment. So there's a very clear understanding of the disease. Companies try to fix that genetic lesion, and they'll do a phase 1-2 study and get like some decent evidence that it works. Sometimes they're able to even file for approval on that. And FDA, we've been seeing, is more willing to approve drugs for serious conditions that have no other alternatives if the drug makes sense with the genetic cause and if there's some pretty solid hints of efficacy. So we've been seeing that happen more and more for my space, which is really positive because the faster my companies can get drugs approved, their cost of capital is so high, the better off they are, the less dilutive they have to be to shareholders over time.
Exactly. I mean, more red tape, more politics that are involved is just delays, delays, delays. And so looking at the health insurance companies, I know the FDA is a government, health insurance are more private. How do you deal with health insurance companies? I know they're very rigid with what drugs that they're willing to pay for, which drugs that they're willing to market. What decision making do you need to take when dealing with health insurance companies, especially with companies that have no revenue yet? They might be de-risked, but they don't have revenue. And I know that's your expertise. So if you would like to elaborate on that.
Yeah. So I kind of have to think of my companies in two buckets. One would be like companies that are going after mainstream drugs. This would be things like migraine, like we invested in a migraine drug a little while ago. The safety bar is really high on that. And there you have to worry a lot about, okay, how our insurance company is going to make this happen? You have to step through 1 or 2 or 3 generics first before you can get access. Can a small company compete against big companies? So I have to worry about that a lot more for like the mainstream drugs. I'd say like maybe 75% of my investments are for rare diseases where there's no other treatments. And there might only be 3 to 10,000 patients in the United States that have this disease. These drugs are very, very expensive. It's not uncommon to see the drug priced at $500,000 or maybe even $1 million or $2 million a year. So every patient they can get on drug really matters a lot. It's a lot to pay for the insurance company for one patient, but fortunately they only have one patient probably in their entire book. So we have not seen insurance companies pushing back very much on these high-priced rare disease drugs for diseases that are catastrophic and have no treatments. And most of the reason I think that happens is because it's really bad PR for the insurance companies to say, hey, this boy has a devastating disease. He's 8 years old. There's a drug that could extend his life. And this big bad insurance company is not willing to pay for it. They have not been pushing back much in that space at all. That might change in the future, and that's something that I pay careful attention to. I talk to payers to see like where the winds are blowing on this. And there's a little bit out there where some payers are starting to say, there's so many of these drugs now, we probably don't have to pay for every single one if we don't think there's really, really solid evidence. But for the most part, these drugs are very well covered by insurance.
Okay, well, that's amazing to hear because, every other day there's always something on the news saying, health insurance or this person died due to lack of health insurance, or health insurance is not covering this, or health insurance all of a sudden tripled its price, and so on. So whether it's a disease is rare or not, drug treatments, obviously, we all know can be very, very expensive, thousands a month, maybe hundreds a month. And I know Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act a couple of years ago, which aims to reduce these drug prices, and it allows health insurance companies, specifically Medicare, to actually negotiate drug prices, which they were never able to do before. Has this act been a negative or a positive since it has been signed? Has these health insurance companies actually been able to start negotiating and making it better for the consumer?
Yeah, excellent question. So there have been the first part of, so remember, this is Medicare only. So this is the first time that Medicare can ever negotiate drugs. And Medicare is probably like 40% of the drugs are paid for by Medicare. Think Medicare is generally for elderly people, retired people, or people with disabilities. So last year, they did the first round of negotiations. And these negotiations don't go in effect until the beginning of 2026. So there were 10 drugs picked by Medicare. They negotiated them. The price netted out to, I think, about a 30% discount. I'm not sure how much of that is actually going to flow through to the consumer, to be honest, but it is a step in the right direction for society to be able to have Medicare, which is kind of the biggest payer of medicines in the entire world, be able to do some negotiations. From a business standpoint, I'd say it's been really rough for pharma, especially because the IRA limits how much you can raise the price of drugs. And also this negotiation is like a 30% one-time reset on these drugs. So we haven't seen it actually take effect yet because it goes into effect January 1st, 2026. But the door is open for negotiations. They recently announced 15 drugs that'll be approved for, or that will be negotiated for January of 2027. And those are in the process of being negotiated right now. For my space, it's actually been kind of a tailwind because my companies don't really have drugs approved yet, so they can now price them knowing that it's going to be subject to IRA eventually, which means higher prices initially. And it means pharma, suddenly the drugs they had approved are less valuable because the price is going to erode over time. And they want new drugs that aren't yet approved so they can price them higher is what's going to happen. The other tailwind is that the IRA has limited the out-of-pocket max for seniors. This year, the out-of-pocket max is $2,000 for all their drugs, which amounts to $167 a month. So even if you're taking a drug that costs $500,000 a year, you're not going to pay more than $167 a month, and that will cover all the rest of your drugs as well. So it's actually a tailwind for my companies because my companies used to often give away free drug to people that couldn't afford it, and now everyone can afford it because of the IRA.
That is definitely affordable. And, not everybody has insurance coverage. Not everybody has the capability or the resources. So I think this Inflationary Act is actually doing good. And of course, we'll see it in the future once 2026, 2027 come around. Now let's take a look at the past. So the past 5 years, of course, we had devastating COVID, and mRNA vaccines were put out pretty much within a year. It was out to the public. My question is, it was put out so quickly, and there's a lot of people hesitating on taking the vaccine because it was put out so quickly. Were there any shortcuts that companies took to put it out? Was it tried, tested, and true 10-point process? Any type of regulations that they had to avoid? How did it come out so quick? And of course, it is safe. The efficacy is there, but the hesitation is still kind of lingers. What are your thoughts on the mRNA vaccine and how they put it out? And I'm sure there's going to be plenty more coming up in the future as well.
That's a politically loaded question, Jacob, but I'll say this. So the mRNA vaccines, you remember back to COVID, like it was a scary time. They came out at a very important time, and they were very important for opening the world back up. So the things I'll say about the mRNA vaccine is the challenge with COVID is people were being infected with a novel virus. And when you're older, your immune system is not used to seeing brand new things. Babies, their immune system sees brand new stuff all the time. Their immune system reacts properly. They create antibodies to it. When you're elderly, I don't even want to say elderly is 50 because I'm almost there. 50, 60, 70, 80 years old, your immune system hasn't seen a new thing for a long, long time. And the problem with COVID is it would see something brand new and your immune system would freak out. So the people that ran into trouble with COVID were not so much because of the viral load, but because their immune system went absolutely nuts. So we needed to figure out a way for everyone's immune system to see a gentle version of the virus, which was done by the vaccine, without their immune systems going nuts. So the COVID vaccine did a beautiful job of doing that, and it was absolutely perfect for people that were over the age of 50 and people who were in not so great physical shape, because those are the people that tended to have issues. Public health got kind of a black eye from this because the vaccine was kind of pushed down to even kids. They wanted kids to get it, which in retrospect, in my opinion, was not appropriate because they would have been fine in almost all cases from getting the infection naturally. I myself got the COVID vaccine. I didn't have my kids get it because I felt it was tested sufficiently. I had some risk of getting COVID, of having serious problems. Most kids didn't. So the COVID vaccine was tested very well, and it is safe, and it definitely made sense for everyone to get it back when the pandemic was ongoing.
I definitely agree. As you get older, the immune system isn't what it used to be when you were in your 20s and 30s. Like myself,
It is.
I'm getting up there as well. So no, thank you for that, and thank you for clarifying that hesitation because there's so much misinformation, disinformation out there. So thank you for that, Dr. Terry. So now let's just take a little pivot. As a portfolio manager at Emerald, you do manage the Life Science Innovation ETF. Viewers, please check it out. It is amazing, groundbreaking companies that they invest in. So how do you decide on which companies to include in that ETF? You don't have to give us the names of the companies. I'll put up a little holdings picture on the video, but how do you decide? I know you say you deal with a lot of companies that have no revenue, but I'm sure there are a lot of companies that also do have revenue. So how do you decide which ones to include, which ones not to include?
Yeah. So thanks. We launched our ETF back in October. So we're going on like 6 months or 5 or 6 months now. And the holdings are very close to what we owned in our mutual fund, which we've owned for many years. So we probably have like, I don't know, 10 new companies come in and out of the portfolio each year, generally because they're acquired or because the investment thesis has played out the way that we hoped, or sometimes because it didn't. So the way that I pick companies is I look for companies that have groundbreaking science that's highly likely to work. The probability of success is underestimated by the market. They have inflection points coming up in the near term that will matter to the stock, and they have good management teams. I talk to a lot of key opinion leaders, so I understand where the science is going. I pay attention to what FDA is saying, so I understand what FDA wants to see out of these trials. But I basically look for companies that have good data, good drugs, and inflection points that matter that will change the trajectory of the stock in the near future.
Very, very well said. Because when you're looking at ETFs, sometimes you don't even know what you're investing in. You're just investing in the ETF and hope for the best that the managers kind of know what they're doing. But it just totally makes sense that you're looking at not only the fundamentals, but also the future of that company as well. And so talking about AI, AI, of course, is taking the front stage in almost every sector, every department. How much of an impact does AI have on the biotech and pharmaceutical sector? Is AI, just going through all the data and kind of giving a summary of, to other doctors, or what's the impact of AI?
Yeah, so there's a lot of hope for AI in my space right now. There's companies that are founded around, they have an AI engine that can analyze lots of chemical structures and try to create a new chemical structure that's hopefully more likely to work than those that were not AI generated. We're kind of yet to see that play out, but there's a lot of hope for that. Realistically, what I can tell you right now is that a lot of my companies are using AI for things like analyzing like claims databases from payers to try to figure out how many patients truly have our disease and where are those patients being treated, or who has symptoms that are like my disease but they don't have a diagnosis yet. We have companies that are using it for like filling out like part of like when you file for your drug approval, it's like a 50,000 page document, and they can use AI to fill in a lot of the data figures for that. There are like most big pharma has processes in place that try to optimize like antibody formation. I've heard a company say that they can do things like 50% faster, and they believe they have a 70% higher probability of this antibody being viable. But again, we're in the early days of all this being played out. The one limiting thing in biotech with AI is that at the end of the day, you can have all this in silico modeling, which predicts that drugs will work, but you still have to be able to you still have to use the drugs in humans. And that requires somebody to consent to be in the study, and it requires the study to take 6 months for the endpoint to play out. So you can't speed up every aspect of the drug development process with AI, but it's certainly being sprinkled in many areas, and hopefully it will be able to improve efficiencies.
Yeah, I mean, it would be kind of awkward for AI to be doing the study itself. It's like injecting the medicine into it. But no, that totally makes sense. And I've heard that many times from other sectors as well, that AI pretty much does all the tedious work, the data, the analysis, that might take days or months for a human. It might do it within an hour or so. So that's amazing. And so now that obviously we have a new administration in the White House, and tariffs are being talked about left, right, and center pretty much everywhere. Will tariffs have any effect on pharmaceutical drug development, biotech sector, or any of that nature?
I'm hesitant to say no effect whatsoever, but it's pretty close to that.
Okay.
So most of the drugs that are manufactured, you get like the raw active ingredient from India or China, but that is like less than 1% of the total cost of the molecule. So minimal impact of tariffs on the biotech space.
So there won't be any extra percentages on the price that you pay for the drug. So, okay, that's actually good to hear. And so what are some of the biggest mistakes, investment mistakes, that you've seen investors make in this sector? Maybe the wrong
Yeah,
company, maybe they're, what are some of the big mistakes?
probably the biggest mistake I see is whenever I talk, I often have somebody come up to me after I'm done talking and say, "What do you think of this stock?" And they are obsessed with that stock. They are not looking at this stock objectively anymore. It is almost a way of life. They will they will have their social media Twitter handle be like all about this stock, and they will have complete blinders on. I suspect they are far over leveraged to these stocks. My stocks are really risky. Like I'm looking for stocks that go up 300 or 400%, but stocks that can go up 300 or 400% can also go down 100%. And you need to make sure that your portfolio is not over leveraged to something that can go down 100% in a bad day. And it doesn't go down 100% over the course of months, weeks, years. It's one morning they might put out a press release and say, "Uh-oh, we had a safety finding." And you need to be aware that these safety findings can happen, and these stocks are very volatile. So I see people that are blind to new data points that go against their thesis or their hopes, and they are way too tied up in one single stock. Diversity is key here. With our ETF, we own about 35 stocks, which I feel like is still rather concentrated. But on average, that would mean our average position is like a 300 basis point or 3% position. Your personal account or your investing shouldn't be 70% in one drug stock, no matter what drug stock that is and how much you love that drug stock.
It's we're both on the same page. I see it all the time. I always get comments on my channel. What do you think about this stock? And they're telling me they're 90% leveraged into it. So, viewers, diversify. Please diversify. Not only in the biotech sector, but what advice would you give to a new investor just in general? So we just discussed stay away from just a single stock leverage, but any other advice that you may have for a new investor, professional investor, whether it's this sector or any other sector?
I would so number one, like I'm doing this with my kids right now. My kids are teenagers and they want to start investing in stuff, and they have these dreams of making 100% overnight. And I'm like, guys, it's not like that. Often, you need to number one, understand the fundamentals of the companies you're investing in. At a bare minimum, you need to listen to the earnings calls. They happen quarterly. You got to listen to them or read the transcript. Must do that. Look at their corporate presentation. Look how they're changing it, and because if they change it, it's for a reason. So the changes are kind of the key things that I look for. Also, when I read their 10Q, their quarterly filings, or their 10K, look for the changes. The reason they changed it is because things are different now. So you need to understand how things are going. So those are the key things and the bare minimum you have to do as an investor. If you don't have time to do those things, you probably don't have time to invest. You need to understand the fundamentals. At Emerald, we are all about understanding the fundamentals of each company that we're investing in. I try to think of every possible thing that can go wrong and get comfortable with the possibility that this can go wrong and make sure that I understand the appropriate upside downside skew on each stock.
That is amazing wisdom. I mean, I know a lot of people who their neighbor will say, I just invested in this and they just run with it without actually doing any due diligence, any fundamental analysis. It's just word of mouth, whatever the hype is, whatever the trend is. And especially in this sector that is actually very, I would say, detailed and not complex, but just very attention to detail. You have to look at the paperwork, whether it's quarterly, whether it's the earnings call, you have to look into it. So Dr. Terry, that was amazing knowledge and wisdom. So on this channel, we just take another minute. We ask out of the box questions. Hopefully you're up for it. They're very awesome. So if if Emerald was a person, what kind of personality do you think it would have?
Emerald, so we are a Wall Street firm, but we are blue collar. Like we would be a construction worker, roll your sleeves up, get dirty. We work harder than many others because we are digging for data points that other people don't have because that's the information advantage that we have. So we focus on small and mid cap stocks, and the reason we do that is because there's often only like 1, 2, 3, 4 sell side analysts covering it. There's a lot of information that's not known. If you're looking at like the Mag 7 or something, like there's not much information that you can dig up as an individual investor that someone else doesn't know. So we are looking for data points that other people don't have, and that's tedious. Hard work. So we are blue collar hard workers at Emerald. Our mascot is the groundhog. We say we dig for data points that other people don't have. So we're looking for information edges. And every time I have an intern, they're like, boy, this is a lot of work. I was like, well, if it was easy, everyone else would do it, and then we wouldn't have an edge. So we would be blue collar construction workers.
I absolutely love that. You're probably the only company I've spoken with that has a mascot. So the groundhog makes perfect sense. Dig for those diamonds. Okay, next question. What's the most random app that you have on your phone or device right now? Or maybe something you deleted recently?
My phone, I'm a really practical person, so my phone isn't so exciting. If you talk to my kids, you'd know that I hate apps that just suck up your time. I was like, your phone is a tool to enhance your productivity, not to kill your time.
Yeah.
The strangest, most random app I have is called Sun Surveyor. So
Oh,
whenever I travel, I love sunrises, but sometimes you get in a city in the evening and I just naturally wake up really early every day. So I see a lot of sunrises. This Sun Surveyor app, I can like point it up at the sky and it will tell me where the sun is going to come up and when it's going to come up. So I like to get a good vantage point on sunrises whenever I end up in a new city.
Okay, that is an amazing app. You know what? I might have to download it because I'm an early bird as well. I like seeing the sunrise. So thank you for that tip. And last one. I know you mentioned that you could be in business, but if you weren't in business, finance, or investing at all, what career path would you have taken?
Well, the easy cheating answer would be I'd be a scientist because I did a PhD and I was a scientist for a few years. But throw that out. When I was considering college, I wanted to be a phys ed teacher because I love fitness and being active and teaching kids sports. So I guess I'd probably be a phys ed teacher.
I think that's amazing because a lot of us did want to be phys ed teachers growing up. We're like, that's like the best job. You play sports all day and
Yeah,
you
I'll play
get paid
games all
for it.
day.
Yeah. Okay, so Dr. Terry, thank you so much for all that wisdom and gems of knowledge. I definitely learned a lot. I'm sure my viewers are going to be learning a lot from this video. Is there, before we conclude this interview, is there any last mentions, any significant events coming up that you would like to throw out there to my viewers and digital world?
Um, I don't think I have anything else to say. You did a really good job. Thank you for being so prepared. I really enjoyed this.
No problem at all. I always try to make whoever I'm interviewing interested in our conversations. So, Dr. Terry, again, thank you. I know it's a busy time for all of us. This is my viewers. This is not the only time you'll see Dr. Terry on this channel. We would love to continue seeing the journey of the biotech sector, the pharma and drug development sector, and of course, what Emerald may come up in the near future. So, Dr. Terry, thank you so much. My viewers, I will have all of Dr. Terry and Emerald's information in the description box. So make sure you like and subscribe. And until the next time, stay ranting.